Welcome to NFL Daily, where we're always designated to return the next day. I'm Gregg Rosenthal. I'm with Evan Silva. I was thinking back to my days back at Roto World. Cutdown day. A tough day in the NFL for a lot of players. A compelling day for front offices where you're putting together the roster, you're watching the rest of the league. But I was thinking back to when I was starting out in this business at Roto World, and it was a very busy day. You would have to just watch the transactions and pump them out, minute after minute. You're waiting for the 53 to get reported. And who would be with me in the trenches back then but Evan Silva? So I thought no one better to do this day and go over what we find interesting today. How you doing, Evan?
How's it going, Greg? Yeah, a lot has changed, especially from from a rule standpoint since those days. There used to be like 3 rounds of cuts. There were definitely 2. Now there's only
three back in the day. Now it's 1.
Now there's only 1. And I remember like the night before, especially final cuts, like I'd be rooting, please, teams like release some cuts early so we could just start chipping away at them, because we knew that the next day was going to be absolute hell. And the teams, they were supposed to have all their cuts out by like 4 p.m. or 5 p.m. Eastern time or something like that. But there would always be 1 or 2 teams that wouldn't release their cuts until like hours afterwards. And by that time, I'm punch drunk on the internet, had been blurbing all day waiting for the freaking Raiders to release.
It was always the Raiders and the Seahawks, but I got to give some props to the Raiders. Maybe with Tom Telesco in the building, something changed. They were one of the first teams out. There are still a few straggling teams out there, but we'll make sure they're all covered. We wanted to get going. You're a busy man. You're running stuff.
In the blurbs, though, I mean, I would just take a flamethrower to the Raiders, just blasting them for not releasing their cuts on time. But yeah, we can jump into this.
No, I remember that. I love the caustic Silva blurbs, and they weren't labeled with who wrote them, but you could always tell which one was a Silva blurb. And yeah, that's how I look at today's show. Look, there weren't gigantic headlines, just little nuggets. They're different flavors of these NFL daily shows. We got some big previews coming up this week, but this is more of a housekeeping day where we're looking at what happened around the league, trying to have our takeaways as we really get ready for the season. And so, yeah, let's just dive right into it. I could start in a million different places here. But I'm going to start with OBJ just because I've been tracking this story for a while. He was placed on PUP to start the season. And so you mentioned how the rules have been changing, Evan. PUP means you're out for 4 games now. You're eligible to return at that point. You're going to have to be activated at some point in there. And the insiders, of which I'm having one on later in the show, maybe I'll ask him about it, Ian Rapoport, said, this was a possible outcome the whole time with OBJ, but give me a break. They weren't saying that publicly. It's pretty disappointing for them. They really want to run an 11 offense here with 3 wide receivers. They wanted Odell Beckham to be a big part of the team, and he's just not going to be.
I mean, he opened camp on active PUP though, and he obviously never got on the practice field. I feel like the beat writers were talking about how they would barely even see him around the facility. Mm-hmm. I think it could be potentially a positive for Odell Beckham. He's not going to have to play the whole season. When they get him back in week 5 or week 6 or week 7, he's going to be healthier than he is now. And at that point, maybe he can join their 3 receiver set. I think one guy who's kind of interesting here to see what kind of a role he can earn, and I think it's Braxton Berrios is going to open the season as the number 3, but Malik Washington, the 6th round pick, I think is kind of interesting all of a sudden.
Yeah, they're banged up. Jalen Waddle hasn't been healthy. River Craycraft hasn't been healthy, and I'm just curious. Well, I got you. Like, what are you viewing for this Dolphins offense? Because usually they start like a house on fire, but their offensive line, the receivers are banged up. The running backs look awesome. Like, what's your fantasy outlook right now? And yeah, people get over to establish the run. It's draft season. I got a draft on Wednesday. My kids have a draft on Friday. Like, it's time. It's time to be getting that subscription and getting your money's worth.
I mean, I have Tyreek Hill as a top 5 overall pick, number 3 right now in my top 150 rankings. 1,700 plus yards in both of his seasons under Mike McDaniel. I'm not too worried about his injury stuff. And then Jalen Waddle last year was like a consensus 2nd round pick. This year you can get him in the 4th because he's not coming off his greatest season. He was banged up a lot last year, but I love him. I love taking him in the 3rd round. If something were to happen to Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle is going to win your fantasy league.
Ooh, I like that. So that's the Dolphins on Tuesday. The Packers started making moves on Monday, including a trade for Malik Willis from the Titans for a 7th-round pick. And then they cut Sean Clifford, who was their backup quarterback last year. They also cut my guy from Tulane, Michael Pratt. Tough day out here for the Pratt pack because there was a report on SI.com that he might not even get back to the practice squad, that they want to keep Clifford there. I mean, 7th-round pick out of Pratt. I mean, Malik Willis being one snap away from playing for a contender is a little surprising to me.
Yeah, I would agree with that. He was supposed to be the number 3 overall pick and went in the 3rd round, Malik Willis, and he just never showed anything. I mean, obviously he's athletic. He's got a strong arm, but just in terms of consistency, ball location, I mean, he just really never put anything together. Even in preseason games, he was largely unimpressive.
Yeah, I know for fantasy, A.J. Dillon going on injured reserve for the season. That was a surprise.
Yes.
It might be something where they can work out an injury settlement at some point. He had a stinger. And then Marshawn Lloyd is not on IR, not on PUP. He's on the active roster. I guess he's the backup. I don't know if he's healthy. Like, what's the fallout there in Green Bay?
Marshawn Lloyd has been out for 2.5 weeks. There was actually a report that he would end up opening the season on a list. Probably it would be short-term IR. But for now, he is there. I think Emmanuel Wilson would be on track to be the Packers' number 2 running back. This is a player that maybe the Packers like more than we know. But to me, the biggest beneficiary is like they are going to open the season with Josh Jacobs as a true workhorse behind a pretty good run-blocking offensive line in an offense where I think the arrow was pointing up. I think Josh Jacobs, awesome 3rd-round fantasy pick with very little competition in the backfield.
I love Jacobs. He's very hit or miss. He's kind of due for a hit year. I would just worry. Our producer Randy's a Packers fan here. If I'm Randy, I mean, you're one injury away from like Emmanuel Wilson, RB1 maybe week 1, and one injury away from Malik Willis. Obviously, everyone would be a problem if you lose your quarterback, but just a little thin at those positions. They also cut their draft pick from a year ago, Anders Carlson, so they have their new kicker is Greg Joseph, at least for now. And we might as well say the public service announcement that everyone feels the need to say this time of year. It's true, though. These are not the final rosters. There's going to be more moves. If there was a team that was going to pick up a veteran running back, Green Bay would probably be high on the list.
Absolutely.
Another veteran move on Tuesday, a trade. Ernest Jones, been tracking this the last couple days. The Titans trade for the Rams captain on defense. Weird. They only had to give up a pick swap of a 5th and a 6th-round pick. So basically the Rams said, we're getting rid of this guy. We'll take whatever we can get. Shocking to me because like when Aaron Donald retired, he was literally quoted saying to Ernest Jones, this is your defense now. And like Ernest Jones is a guy the Rams have talked up a lot as kind of a leader and everything. And now he's just gone for nothing strange. I think an undrafted free agent they really like, Omar Spates, is going to start, but just a weird camp for the Rams losing a bunch of players. And Ernest Jones, it sounds like maybe he's not 100% healthy or fit after surgery this offseason, but a good pickup for the Titans who were not looking good at linebacker.
Yeah, Omar Spates went undrafted out of LSU. So, every game that he plays in is like huge, million scouts there. I feel like NFL teams don't usually miss on a guy like that because there's so much tape on him. But obviously he looked good in training camp, and right now he is slotted in as a starter at off-ball linebacker.
Yeah, they're a strange team. I don't know what to think about them right now.
They are a strange team, and every year I'm kind of like, what are they doing? And then 80% of the time it works out.
Yeah, I think for fantasy, Puka Nakua's injury is something to keep an eye on. Cooper Kupp has looked really healthy. I think it remains to be seen how Puka Nakua comes off this injury. Just because he's back at practice, we just don't know. So that's a little worrisome. Like, where do you have those two guys? I'm going to hit you up for some fantasy nuggets while we're doing this. Why not? Like, where are you seeing Puka Cooper go off the board? I would have said they're nowhere near each other in my mind a couple weeks ago. And now for value, I might rather have Cooper Kupp just because I'm a little freaked out about the Puka injury and how physical they have to be.
I would tend to agree with you. Puka Nacua right now, though, is my 12th overall player. But yeah, I mean, I haven't really heard any substantive or positive report on his health since he went down, which was a while ago. I mean, I'm just not really sure. I have Cooper Kupp like number 23 or 24 overall. But I think that for value, I mean, Puka Nacua kind of regularly goes in the first round at the end of the first round. I think for value, I'm leaning toward Cooper Kupp right now.
I'm going to just give my tip here. I'm fading Puka Nacua right now, just based on...
Okay. Based on the vibes?
I'll leave it there. Charles Omenihu is on the PUP list. He is on the Chiefs. He's a pass rusher. There are a lot of moves for the Chiefs, so I'm just going to go through them, the defending champ. By the way, the Titans also cut Caleb Farley, who was a first-round pick a couple of years ago, so I thought that one was interesting. He just was never healthy enough to stay on the field. For the Chiefs, Charles Omenihu on the PUP NFI list. He was hurt, of course, late last season in the playoffs, and so he's not going to be back for a while. They traded a 7th-round pick for Cam Thomas, who was a 3rd-rounder from the Cardinals. It's kind of weird that the Cardinals are giving up on an edge rusher that the Chiefs want because the Chiefs are so much better at that position. The Chiefs also traded a late pick for tight end Peyton Hendershot. I would be afraid, Evan, to trade with the Chiefs at this point. Brett Veach has kind of reached my standard of what the Patriots used to be. Just be like, I don't want to trade them players. Though maybe they know something we don't know. They're going to make us look bad.
Also, the Cardinals moved on from Cam Thomas after losing B.J. Ojulari for the season. And do you know what the deal is with Darius Robinson, their 2nd-round pick?
Yeah, he is on injured reserve, designated to return. So
these are the kind of moves like when I'm building my matchups column for Week 1. Like there's a cluster situation right now going on with the Cardinals. I actually kind of like it for their offense. I think they're going to be in a lot of shootout situations this year because on defense they're just so shorthanded, especially up front. Their best cornerback is Sean Murphy Bunting. I mean, they're gonna, and I like Jonathan Gannon as a schemer, but it's going to be hard to scheme around this.
Right. I took an early look at the Week 1 lines. I've only saw them like 2, and immediately I saw Bills -6, and I was just thinking, well, fantasy and that. Bills are going to put 35 on this team. Maybe the Cardinals can kind of keep up, and Kyler and the offense will be fun too, and it'll just be a fantasy score fest. But they're putting up 35 on that Cardinals team. They do not have much. All right, here's other things the Chiefs did. They traded for Peyton Hendershot. He's like their 4th tight end. They cut Kadarius Toney, and then Carson Steele, the running back, makes the team. They only keep, I think, 4 running backs, and he's a fullback running back. Are you into Carson Steele in like the deepest league possible?
I kind of am. I kind of want to see how it plays out over the next couple of days and if they add another running back. Yeah. But Carson Steele showed a lot in the preseason. He kind of gives me vibes of is Peyton Hillis, the old Browns running back who was actually on a Madden cover one year. Carson Steele ran 4.77 coming out of college. You do not see running backs that run that slow make it in the NFL. But, I mean, he couldn't have done more in the preseason to earn this roster spot.
Yeah, I think Andy Reid loves him. They love having fullbacks. Speaking of, there's only a few left in the league. The Cowboys kept one, too. They have a rookie fullback, Hunter Lipke. Now, that would be a very deep league if you drafted Hunter Lipke, although I think he's going to be on the field to sneak him out. They also kept Deuce Vaughn, the diminutive son of their running backs coach in Dallas or their position coach in Dallas. They kept Ryan Flournoy. I thought that was interesting, a rookie receiver. They kept Andrew Booth, who they just traded for and got cooked by Easton Stick the other day. So that's not a good sign for their cornerbacks. And they might sign Dalvin Cook. Like, what are you doing with this Cowboys backfield? Like, Lipke's going to be in the mix. You got Dowdle. You got Zeke. I don't know if Dalvin Cook's going to sign because at this point, it's been 24 hours since that report came out, and he hasn't signed yet. I don't know. I'm just fading all of it.
Yeah, I generally am as well. I'll take Rico Dowdle late if he's there and I need a running back or something, but I'm not – there's nothing to be excited about. The Cowboys roster is so thin, man.
They really are.
They're so thin. It's kind of like I feel like this could be a season where the bottom falls out on them. Like they lose like CeeDee Lamb for an extended period, or I mean, let alone Dak. Although their backup quarterback situation isn't terrible. Cooper Rush has been solid in past opportunities, but I just feel like they're hanging by a thread this year, relying on rookies to start on the offensive line. Just I don't know.
I'm with you. They also cut Carl Lawson, who I mentioned. They kept signing all these veterans in the last week or two. Most of them stuck. Carl Lawson, who used to be a great pass rusher for the Bengals, but just never was the same after injuries, was cut by the Cowboys. It's a weird team. By the way, CeeDee Lamb's not even on their active roster. They have a commissioner's, or not a commissioner's exempt, but he's on an exempt list for now before he gets fully back into it. So they're kind of using a roster spot that way. The Vikings are not using a roster spot on their first round pick from just a couple of years ago. Lewis Cine did not make this team. I mentioned Andrew Booth got traded by the Vikings. So that means Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, who's done a good job otherwise as a GM. That means his first 2 draft picks, first and second round picks, are no longer on the team. It was only 2 years ago. They also cut Kene Nwangwu, which I was really surprised about. One of the better return guys in the league. I actually think he will be a guy that gets claimed on waivers. N'Keal Harry did not make this team. Any thoughts on the Vikings, on Lewis Cine, what's going on there? I kind of like their backfield, even though I think it's only 2 players right now. They might add a running back. They only have 2 running backs right now.
Well, when we were talking about this a little bit before the show, but when they drafted Andrew Booth and Lewis Cine in that first Kwesi draft, they probably thought, man, we have the making, this is the foundation of our secondary for the next at least 4 years. And they really got nothing out of either of those guys. Even from a positional draft standpoint, yeah, dude, taking DBs high makes sense. Those guys were both very highly touted. Booth, a lot of people thought he would be a first round pick that year. Just a complete disappointment. Kwesi has struggled in the draft. I mean, let's be real. Kwesi has, and I still kind of believe in him, but he struggled in the draft. The release of Kene Nwangwu is interesting for Ty Chandler as a late round fantasy sleeper. I actually really like Aaron Jones in the middle rounds. For whatever reason, people don't want to draft him.
Oh, I like
I've been
him
getting a decent amount of him, and then Ty Chandler late as a guy that, hey, if Aaron Jones has durability issues, which he has had a decent amount in the past, Ty Chandler becomes, an explosive second option that you could get for really cheap in fantasy.
I like both of those guys. I would handcuff them. We're still using handcuff as a in the fantasy lexicon. Sometimes Leviton on your podcast, and one thing I like about it is you guys get to it. You get through it so fast. But sometimes Levitan uses words I don't even know anymore. Although I do just like how he calls everyone dust. Everyone, it always delights me when I'm just hoping to never be dust in my career.
Yeah, I'm with you.
All right, let's go to the Panthers. They put Jonathan Brooks. This is some fantasy impact here on the PUP list. Also DJ Wanham, who's an edge rusher. They just have no one at the edge, and yeah, I guess it's Chuba Hubbard in the backfield, and Jonathan Brooks is someone, you can stash in fantasy, but he might not be really all the way back till pretty late in the season.
Yeah, and I've got him. I have to, right after we do the show, I'm gonna go make a bunch of changes. All the changes are from player 85 overall to 150 overall. But I mean those mid round and late round picks matter. I have Jonathan Brooks right around number 90, and he needs to go into the 120s or something like that. I'll figure that out. But, it seemed like there was a chance he could be back by week 3 or week 4. But right now, I mean, he's definitely out through week 4, won't be eligible to come back until week 5. And then who knows? Is he even going to get that full-time role? The Panthers could be 0-4 by then. I mean, I don't think they're going to be any good. And, how would they be incentivized to give the ball to Jonathan Brooks a lot?
Right. I liked how he played in college, but they're all about 2025, and they're not going to want to.
It seems like he's behind schedule. When they drafted him, they were saying that he would be ready for training camp.
This happens a lot, though. That's the thing with OBJ, and a lot of times, everything's optimistic, and then you get to cutdown day or you get to training camp, and these guys aren't ready. But it makes sense to be careful with them. The Broncos tried to trade Tim Patrick and Samaje Perine, but no one wanted them, so they just cut them. They also cut little Jordan Humphrey. They did keep all 3 of their quarterbacks. Samaje Perine is a guy that could land elsewhere. The Eagles cut Paris Campbell. who initially was going to be their third receiver, but then they trade for Jahan Dotson. They kept James Bradbury, who converted to safety. He's getting paid $20 million to be like their fifth safety, but it's guaranteed money, and they just figure like, well, why not keep him? He's a good guy. The Browns are keeping all four quarterbacks. So this is one to watch, I think, over the next few days. They cut down to Foreman at running back, so they're very thin at running back right now. What do you see about the Browns backfield? And I can't imagine they're going to keep Tyler Huntley and Dorian Thompson-Robinson and Jameis Winston. But it was a little interesting. There were reports that came out that saying they're looking to trade Huntley or Winston, that they're going to keep DTR, and that maybe even Winston's available. So that's just something to watch the next couple of days. Are you buying Jerome Ford now because they only have two running backs on the roster right now?
I am. I've kind of always been buying Jerome Ford. But, today, like after they cut Deontay Foreman, a bunch of people were saying like, well, he could definitely be back. He just gives him an element that Jerome Ford and Pierre Strong do not, in that he's like a big back who can run with power, who has like legitimate production on his resume in the NFL. So I think there's a possibility that he could come back. The Browns better not trade Jameis Winston because he's going to be their starter at some point this year. If anything happens to Deshaun Watson, which Deshaun Watson has already struggled with, some soreness in his throwing arm or whatever, I would be terrified of him. I do wonder that because Jameis Winston is such he can be a galvanizing presence. You see the pregame stuff that he leads. I mean, he's the backup quarterback. He's leading the pregame stuff. Do they think that, he might be encroaching on Deshaun Watson? Do we need to get rid of him?
Yes.
Because like the team could like start to rally around. Like, you remember when like no one would sign Cam Newton even to be their backup because he has this charisma and presence. Like if something is going wrong with the, mediocre starter, like the team is going to turn to Cam.
I'm with you. I think that could be a factor. I don't think Derek Carr totally loved all the love that Jameis Winston was getting in New Orleans. I don't think they even considered bringing back Joe Flacco because I don't even know about forget about the locker room. The city just loved Joe Flacco so much that you couldn't have him around. It's a whole thing. And Tyler Huntley looked good enough in the preseason that maybe they'd be willing to. I don't know. Let's take a quick break. We have a few more items to get through with Evan. I'm looking forward to that. And then I'm going to have Ian Rapoport on to wrap up this news-based show. We're a news show sometimes. News. Back on NFL Daily. I mean, this is all protein on this one. What is that? What's the all protein diet? Now I'm blanking.
What, keto?
Keto. Yeah. This is the keto of shows. It's just like all protein, no filler, no pasta, not even any fruit. We're just getting to the cuts and letting you know which ones matter, so you're smarter than the people around you. 49ers had some interesting ones. Elijah Mitchell's out for the season. Immediately, that has fantasy implications. Their backup is who? Jordan Mason? Who is their backup?
Yes. And Christian McCaffrey right now is dealing with a calf strain. Now, we have a pretty high level of confidence that he's going to be all right, but it's something to keep in mind. I mean, running backs get hurt in the NFL, especially when they're utilized as workhorses like Christian McCaffrey has been in San Francisco and will continue to be. But Jordan Mason, by all accounts, he used to have a sort of contentious relationship with Bobby Turner, the Broncos, the Broncos used to be the Broncos RB's coach, 49ers RB's coach, and now Bobby Turner has been praising him, and he's locked in as the number 2 right now. Especially with Eli Mitchell out for the season. Eli Mitchell opened training camp as a draftable guy. Obviously, I mean he's done.
I like that Jordan Mason pick because I guess the history of Christian McCaffrey. I know he's been healthy the last few years, but soft tissue injury in August, all the workload he had last year, just from a fantasy perspective, freaks me out a little bit. Also, it's a team that September through November only matters so much. They can be careful with Christian McCaffrey. This is a team that's worrying about December and especially January and hopefully February for them. With that in mind, some big players not active on the team right now. Hufanga goes to the PUP, their safety. Brandon Ayuk is on the roster. I expect that thing to happen. Trent Williams is not, because he's on the reserve list right now. And the longer this goes, the more I'm wondering if he actually does miss a game or two. And then Dre Greenlaw is on the PUP list. So a lot of talent there. The Texans actually cut a lot of players I recognize, which is always a good sign. It's like, oh, your roster's so good that they were able to cut Noah Brown, decent player, Desmond King, CJ Henderson. Case Keenum went to IR. We talked about him with Nick Shook the other day. He's not healthy, so he's on IR. Tim Boyle was cut. Christian Harris goes to IR return. Their starting linebacker. Cam Akers made this team. Like that. Damian Pierce made this team. John Mechie made this team. This is a fun team. Like, who's your kind of favorite value type guy from the Texans?
I mean, I love all the starters on the Texans, and it's hard to sift through their backups. There was at one point in time where I really wanted to like Damian Pierce, but he was atrocious all preseason. I actually wonder if they're holding on to him to try to get a 7th round pick from him or something for him. Cam Akers looked great in the preseason.
Yeah, he
really,
did.
really, really good. And I wonder if he might end up being the number 2 back for Houston.
Yeah, something to watch week 1 between those two guys. And yeah, I think one of these wide receivers could get traded still at some point. Noah Brown, there was some question whether he's 100%, but he's going to be on a roster somewhere just because he's better than he's not great. He's a journeyman, but he's better than half the Steelers wide receivers that they have rostered. The Falcons kept Taylor Heineke. Thought that was interesting. One of the teams keeping 3 quarterbacks, so no trade there. The Lions did not keep 3. They cut Nate Sudfeld. Hendon Hooker is their number 2. That could be a situation where Sudfeld goes to the practice squad and becomes the backup. We'll see. They cut Donovan Peoples-Jones. They only have 52 players on the roster, which is weird. And so I do wonder if they're going to add a receiver. They feel like a team that needs to add a receiver. An undrafted free agent named Isaiah Williams made the team, and he is right now wide receiver 4 for the Lions.
Yeah, I wonder if Tim Patrick might end up there. I mean, as like, big physical receiver who can at very least block and give him something in the possession game. I love Jamison Williams. They have really cleared the deck for Jamison Williams. Like, he essentially has faced no competition for the number 2 receiver role. I do think that's a little risky. I think they add a veteran at some point.
Yeah, that would be interesting. The Saints cut our guy, the Irish kicker, Charlie Smith. They tried to not play him at all in the preseason so no one would take him. But then he hit a 65-yarder at my alma mater, Yulman Stadium at Tulane in an open practice that they were taping, and everyone's like, "What? Who's this Irish kid that just booted a 65-yarder?" But they cut him anyway, so I doubt another team will claim him, but he'll be on their practice squad if not, and maybe replace Blake Grupe. By the way, I know we have a lot of international listeners, and I think sometimes the international media and maybe the listeners too, like, they freak out when these guys get cut. Like Louis Rees-Zammit in Kansas City. It's all part of the process, and you get a free roster spot if you're part of this IPP. So it happens. It takes years to develop, sometimes before they make their marks. It's all part of the process. Kendre Miller went to injured reserve. One thing I was going to say about this team, I don't know if you have any comment, just 4 undrafted free agents make the team. And like, this is what happens when you never have any draft picks and you don't develop any good players with the picks that you have. They're just like so thin at so many positions. They're just counting on undrafted guys to come in and make an impact.
Well, you remember they had that one sick draft. I think it was only like a 5-man draft, and it saved the franchise.
It was 2017 now, yes.
Yeah, but they haven't drafted anything like that. Over the course of time, the draft is kind of like a crapshoot. I mean, we that's kind of been determined. So when they crushed that one draft, that wasn't necessarily everyone's like, oh, Jeff Ireland's going to get a GM job again at some point, and then like they can't draft for the next 5 years straight.
Marshawn Lattimore was part of that draft. He is on the roster. Don't know what's up with him.
I don't think he's practiced all camp.
Yeah, I don't know what's up with him. I do believe you can draft and develop well at certain positions with continuity on the coaching staff. Like, some teams are better at certain positions. I would say the Saints are excellent at identifying and developing cornerbacks. As much as Dennis Allen, I make fun of him. Like, that's what he does well, and they're great at that, and they've done it repeatedly. After that, I don't really know what's going on. They cut Equanimeous St. Brown. Dennis Allen said he won't announce who the backup quarterback is, which is just stupid. That he just wants to continue the competition. I mean, you're gonna have to announce it once week 1 gets here. So just what are we doing here? Jordan Mims made the team as a running back. He could be a fantasy pickup during the year. Wouldn't be surprised. Flying through the rest of these because not big headlines here, Evan. But just if you have any thoughts, jump in. The Pats cut Chad Ryland, who was their 4th-round pick. They traded up for him with Bill Belichick's last draft last year. Bailey Zappi's gone. But Joe Milton made the team, and Joey Sly made the team. How about that?
Well, Joe Milton is a developmental guy worth hanging on to, and the Patriots are very much ensconced in a rebuild. So
they look good. He looked pretty good in the preseason. Kayshon Boutte made the team, which I was interested to see because he played well, and so they're keeping a ton of receivers and just seeing who sticks. All right, only 2 quarterbacks from the 2024 draft are currently on an active roster of the team that drafted them. Only 2 in their entire class. This is only 2 years and 3 months later. I'm saying that now because Bailey Zappi was cut, although he'll probably end up on the practice squad. But right now, can you name who those 2 players are?
What draft?
2022, only 2 years ago. One of them.
The only first rounder was Kenny Pickett.
Yeah.
And then another quarterback didn't go to the 3rd round, I think.
Malik Willis was one of the 3rd rounders.
But
Yes.
no,
Mr. Irrelevant, of course, Brock Purdy is in that class and is now a plus quarterback. And then Skylar Thompson is the only other one. It was actually the last 2 quarterbacks drafted, 2 7th-round picks. So it is a crapshoot sometimes. The Bills made their moves today. They cut Frank Gore Jr. I was disappointed to see that. No surprise, but he had a nice preseason, so he might end up having an NFL career, which would be cool. They cut Kareem Jackson, Lyle Collins, some veterans, Tyrell Shavers, who was a young receiver I was keeping an eye on. I just want to give you the names of the Steelers wide receivers, Evan, before we let you go, that did make the team, rather. This is their group. George Pickens, okay. And then wide receiver 2 through 5, Van Jefferson, Roman Wilson, who hasn't been healthy all camp, Calvin Austin, Scotty Miller. Is that the worst? That's worse than the Patriots. I know they have George Pickens, so maybe that makes it better, but wide receiver 2 plot on, that's the worst one.
In terms of playable, playable individuals, yes. The Patriots have a better receiver core. I think the Steelers having George Pickens puts him over the top. But, maybe Jalen Polk can become 85% of George Pickens.
I just mean wide receiver 2 on. That's the worst group in the league, I would say.
I don't even know if it's going to matter the way that Arthur Smith calls offense.
Well, yeah, that's a fair point. Who is the wide receiver 2 in Atlanta?
They're going to be playing a lot of Darnell Washington this year, it looks like.
I wouldn't be surprised. They'll play 3 tight ends. All right, let's wrap it up with the Cardinals cutting Desmond Ridder, who they traded Rondale Moore for, who was a week 1 starter at quarterback last year. Now he didn't even make the Cardinals. They also cut Michael Carter at running back, who's had some moments. The Jags cut a bunch of veterans that you might know: Trey Flowers, Adrian Amos, Terrell Edmonds. Jerry Rice's son made the Chargers. What do you make of this Chargers receiver group?
Well, again, it's a team that just is going to run the PISS out of the ball, and it's like what receivers can block the best. They're going to get on the field, I think.
And that might not. We'll see on Ladd McConkey, but seeing him in person, as NFL players go, he's going to struggle crashing down on those outside linebackers sometimes. Not a heavy guy. The Chargers also kept Tony Jefferson, who had that big preseason finale. Wrapping it up with the Bears. You know what struck me with the Bears cuts was Hard Knocks has done such a bad job getting me invested in these teams this year. I just feel like it's been like a music video of watching preseason games this year, that usually when there's cuts, I'm like, oh, that guy from Hard Knocks gets cut. And I've watched them all. And this year I'm not invested. I know it's not your team, but you do live in Chicago, Silva. Where are you at with the Bears, with Hard Knocks, with their offense, anything?
I mean, I have a lot of thoughts on the Bears. They have the easiest first half of the schedule in the entire league. I think they're going to come out of the gates 5-2, 6-1, something like that. And the city is just going to go absolutely insane to the point where I'm going to stop liking the Bears at all and rooting against them because they could just get so annoying. But I think they're going to be good. I mean, I think they're going to win 10 games this year. Their win total on sportsbooks is 8.5. I think that 9 is a slam dunk. I think they're going to be good.
Having Silva on for this day, the meat and potatoes, the keto diet of days was a great decision. It was a slam dunk. I loved it. Silva, one of the few men I know who truly doesn't root for a team unless you're hiding it from me. It's just
no.
He's just a black-hearted individual who's just all about the fantasy value and making that money for you. So yeah, if you want some help doing that in your fantasy leagues, go over to Establish the Run. Thanks, Silva. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
See you, man. All right, we're going to wrap up NFL Daily. It's late August day. My brother Dean Rosenthal's 50th birthday, by the way. He would never listen to a football program. He just doesn't care. But you know who does care a lot about roster cuts? It's Ian Rapoport, fresh off a post-roster cuts workout and dressed down for the occasion if you're watching on YouTube. Just to see what a post-workout Ian looks like, you should like and subscribe on YouTube to the show. Thank you, Ian.
What's going on? Yeah, that's one of the great pleasures of my job is when a deadline happens, we do some TV and then I get a workout in and I know my phone's not going to buzz like it's been buzzing for the last 72 hours. So very nice and very cathartic.
Really? Because I feel like it still could buzz. First of all,
there'll be some things, but it's not like the flurry of like, who do you hear is getting traded? Is this guy available? Like the team's interested in this guy. Like, that stuff is basically nonstop for the whole week. So that, there'll still be some trades the next couple of days, but that mostly ends.
Yeah. How about a pox on the teams as we record this still haven't even put their cuts out, which is there's like 4 or 5 of them still out there. Very annoying. But we know that the moves haven't finished for the day. Anything that surprised you today, Ian, with all these cuts?
I mean, I don't know that there's ever that many things that are surprising on Cutdown Day. Teams have been so much more proactive when it comes to trades. Like I remember it was like 6 years ago or something. Jadeveon Clowney got traded on Cutdown Day from, I think it was the Texans to the Seahawks. That would never happen now. That would be at the start. That would be at the start of training camp. The Judon trade years past would have been Cutdown Day. Now it's like teams are way more proactive. They do things earlier, and I think there's more real, honest conversations happening earlier. So, we got a couple trades. I mean, we got an Ernest Jones trade. We got a Malik Willis trade yesterday. I mean, we got some stuff, but I don't know that it's anything that surprising. I think Kadarius Toney getting cut.
How about OBJ? I saw the way you put it out, and I'm not pushing on the insiders here. But you said like this was always a possibility when they first signed OBJ. And I don't know. I heard a lot of optimism this offseason from OBJ. And maybe it's more from like the fans and some of the reporters. But it felt like to me this whole time when he's not on the field, oh, he'll be fine. He'll be fine. It's no big deal. And they really seemed like they were carving out a big spot for him on this team. I think it's pretty disappointing that he's not going to be ready for the season.
I mean, I would say, first of all, the way I put it out, when something like that happens, like I do that intentionally, right? Like I like to, there'll be times when I'll add context to a tweet and I will not get it out fast enough and someone will beat me. And I've done this for 13 years. And I am okay with that. I really am. Like the OBJ thing, I knew somebody might beat me on it, but I'm like, I would like to put it out in the most context-full way possible. So like sources, Beckham out the first 4 games, like that's pretty splashy. But the reality is he had a procedure, surgery. I never got the sense it was particularly close. I got the sense the Dolphins didn't really want to talk about it. And so I think that's why it was sort of shrouded in secrecy because, look, when a guy hasn't practiced all camp, they almost always start on PUP, especially when he's not been with the team. I would also say some realism of where Odell is in his career definitely helps. Like he's not, Odell joining the Browns, which was like the world shook when that trade happened. Like it's different now. He's a complementary piece to an offense that's already very, very good. So I think he'll play. I think he'll contribute. I think it'll be helpful. There'll be some moments, but it's not prime Odell. It's kind of what it is at this point.
I do like that we get Ian Rapoport, part analyst here, not just the NFL insider. Your boss, Tradsberry, told me to point that out, that you're here as a role of providing some analysis, not just the hard news. Give me some analysis on the 49ers. So Brandon Ayuk is on the roster. No surprise. Seems like that's just a matter of time, and yet still nothing. And then Trent Williams is not on the roster. What is your level of do you believe that Trent Williams will play week 1 for the 49ers at this point?
Hold on. Brandon Ayuk has to be on the roster. Like there's not.
No, I know there was not an option to.
Like I know we were talking like conversations on insiders all the time about like, is he going to hold out? Like he can hold out. There are benefits to holding in. In other words, you don't get fined. That's good generally. But the opposite thing is like you have to play. So if Brandon Ayuk doesn't have a deal, if he doesn't have something that he likes, he's contractually obligated to play unless he's going to like fake an injury. In that case, the 49ers can start fining. Like he has to play. Whereas Trent Williams is getting fined, is holding out, but he cannot play. That's his prerogative. Now he'll get fined, but he can still not play. So it's a different situation. I would say this about Trent Williams, and I think it's possible it gets done. I don't know for sure that it is.
He's checking his text right now.
I know they have been talking. I know they have been talking. He is a different dude. And if you were to say to me, is there any player who would simply say, yeah, I'm just not playing without a new deal? Like he would be it. He does not care. Like he sat out half the year with the, team now known as the Commanders because he didn't like the way they treated his medical situation. Like he is a different dude. So absent a new deal, like, yeah, I don't think we're going to see him for a bit.
That was a pro move from you there. You almost said it, but you didn't say it. That's why
I haven't said it on air. I haven't said it on air since they made the change.
That's why you've lasted so long. You've outlasted. I remember when you were at the Boston Herald and you're coming up to me, you and Bree are both, hey, are there any stuff available at Pro Football Talk and stuff? And now look at you. You've outlasted them all.
That seems fake.
The dead bodies of insiders that you've left in your wake. I love it. What else do I want to get to today? Do you have anything on like the Russ? I know it has nothing to do with what happened today, but just the Russ Fields thing and kind of the belief maybe in that building of Russell Wilson and maybe how that situation plays out. Because here's what I would just point out. It's going to be a tough situation for either quarterback. I don't love that offensive line. I don't really love the wide receivers. And I just think... What do you think the feeling of the building is there?
Well, nobody cares about the offensive line, but let me just say this first. I think what we see week 1 is not going to be what we're going to see week like 8. I think they are talented. They're probably going to, not probably, they're going to start 2 rookies. I think they are going to get better. So yes, it's important. It's sort of like the Cowboys. Like I could see the Cowboys struggling the offensive line week 1 and everyone will lose their brains, but they are young and talented. Like they're going to get better. And no one cares about the offensive line, whatever. I don't think it's a tough situation for Justin Fields. I don't. I think he got traded to a place that is good for him, best place he could have got traded for. He has played well in the preseason practices. He's played okay in preseason games. And he is the guy who would sort of theoretically come in for the upset. And he is very talented. And I know has made a really positive impression in the building, just as far as how smart he is, work ethic, how engaged he is. Like, the thought of Arthur Smith kind of making him his Tannehill, but more talented, like that's pretty real. Like that would be pretty good. It's difficult for Russ. And look, he's made so much money and had a lot of success. And so like no one feels sorry for, no one cares. But he was sort of anointed.
You keep saying no one cares. I mean, people care. People care about Russell Wilson. People care about the offensive
Nobody
line.
feels sorry for Russell Wilson.
Yeah.
But it is tough because he was sort of anointed as the would-be starter. He had a calf injury. He watched Fields play well. He's played, again, okay. And the fact that he hasn't seized the job now yet is not like a great sign. So we'll see what happens. There's still a really tough decision, but I don't think it's as easy now as maybe it sort of should have been if you had asked everyone on like July 27th.
I'm using my rap sheet translator there and picking up some vibes, what you're putting down. Last one, just quickly. This could be a yes or no if you want, but there's been no reporting on it, which is there any chance Marshawn Lattimore? Like that seems so quiet and such a situation that I don't understand. He hasn't been on the field at all. I guess he's been hurt, but is there anything going on there that he could get dealt or something could happen?
I don't believe he's going to get dealt. I believe so. Look, it's an odd situation. I believe he and Dennis Allen had a really good talk before camp. I thought he was going to get traded this offseason. He did not. He is an awesome player when he's on the field. Awesome. Like really, really, really good. So if he goes out and plays great, then I think there are no issues. If he goes out and plays great and the team is really struggling, then I'm sure we're going to be talking about him at the trade deadline again. But I don't get the sense that there's an injury now that's going to keep him off the field. I think it's more of he is very specific with his body and his preparation. I think it's more the team being like, get ready, do your thing, and we'll see you week one. I think it was handled well. These things can go different ways. Like, would the Saints be better off with a third rounder or Marshawn Lattimore? I would say probably Marshawn Lattimore because he's very, very good. I just sort of hope it stays that way.
I like it. Again, I used my rap sheet translator. That was a good nugget. I'm glad I asked. You gave me something that, normally I might text you, and who knows if you'd tell me, but I'm picking up what you're putting down, the vibes. We're going to have Ian, hopefully part of the show here and there throughout the course of the season. I'm looking forward to that.
Anything's possible.
Yeah, I mean, anything is possible. Until next time, yeah, football is back. We're excited about it. We'll be back doing an AFC preview with Nick Wright. That's going to be a fun one on our next show. See you next time.